This podcast is sponsored by PeopleCert, the global leader in the development of best practice frameworks and certifications. Come and meet them at the TESOL France annual colloquium in Paris in November and find out how they can help your students realize their ambitions and goals. Thank you to PeopleCert for sponsoring this podcast.
So hello, today we're going to be having a short podcast with George Wilson, who's going to be one of our keynote speakers at TESOL France this November. This year we have two keynote speakers, one on the Friday evening, and then George will be presenting on the Saturday. So just really like to welcome George to this event in November. And thank you for agreeing to be a keynote speaker.
Thank you. It's a real honour and a real pleasure to be with you today.
Just reading a little bit about your biography, your profile. I understand that you work for the British Council, where you're the head of English and school education. And this sounds like a very mysterious title. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do in this role?
Absolutely. So the British Council is the international organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities. And our role really is to build trust and understanding between the UK and countries around the world. We work in over 100 countries physically, and we work with more than 200 countries and territories. So it's really a cultural relations institution working in three areas: arts and culture, educational exchange, and English and school education. And what we mean by that is that we support education systems around the world, really, in the teaching, learning, and assessment of English, but also of subjects taught through English, so CLIL, EMI, etc.
Okay, so great. So as you said, there's three different areas, and you're the head of English and school education. So can you tell us a little bit practically about what that actually involves in France within the educational system?
Absolutely. So we work really, really closely with the Ministry of Education. We work with academy, local education authorities around France, and with lots of operators of the ministry as well, like France Éducation Internationale, the CNED, and others. And our work is in four main areas. The first one is research. So we conduct research, we commission research to support the education system in France. And that research tends to bring together the expertise of the UK and the expertise of France. So quite recently, we've published, for example, a report on CLIL in primary education, looking at the current landscape of this approach and what it means for those who are studying and teaching through CLIL in primary education. We're now commissioning another research report with the Ministry of Education, looking at one particular department and the great things going on in that area in the hope they can be generalized more widely. Second area of our work is policy engagement. So we work very closely with the French government, with the UK government, and with lots of stakeholders to bring people together so they can really exchange best practice, discuss current issues in language teaching, and so on. So, for example, last year we had, in partnership with France Éducation Internationale, we welcomed 80 people to talk about AI and language teaching, which was underpinned by a recent report that we just published at that time. And we published a whole load of outcomes from that event. And we're doing the same thing again this year. This time looking at maximizing learning outcomes in CLIL in primary and secondary education. We also recently worked closely with UNESCO on International Mother Language Day, so helping provide speakers, guests, showcase our projects around the world. The third area is very much technical expertise and support for local education authorities. So we sit on steering committees of projects. We go out, we observe classes, meet teachers, help inspectors around the country deliver their exciting programs around English language teaching. And finally, teacher development, which is what we'll be talking about during the keynote and a little more today, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly with that. So I know that sounds actually quite fascinating. And from a personal point of view, I've been in France now for 17 years, where I am teaching English, not within the educational sector. So I work very much for a private language school, so very much teaching adults in business. But I do have two children who are now young adults, and they have been through the French educational system. So it's interesting to hear that there's a lot going on in the background in terms of educating the teachers, looking at different methodologies and everything like that in the actual educational system. And you said it's a school education. Does that go from what age? You mentioned primary. Does that actually finish at the end of lycée, or what's your view of that?
That's a really interesting question. Part of our work is very much focused on supporting school systems. So that could be anyone in formal basic education, going from pre-primary, through primary and secondary, right up to the end of terminale. But then we also work with English teachers more widely, especially on capacity building and teacher training. And that encompasses all teachers, whether they're in the education system, the formal education system, or whether they're working in higher education. Because to be honest, you can't really separate these things out. What the best lever for improving school outcomes is probably a wider understanding of what's required to teach effectively and great English levels in universities and then by extension in the wider society.
Okay, so it really is a whole remit of education. And how does that actually tie in also from my point of view, working with professionals? How does it tie into sort of further adult education?
It's a good question. So a lot of our work in the next few years will be centered on our updated continuing professional development framework for teachers. So we have one for teachers, and soon we'll be publishing the new version for teacher educators as well. Mm-hmm. That framework is designed very clearly with any teacher of English in mind, but also really with any language teacher in mind. And what's really important within it is that it's setting out 11 professional competencies that are supposed to support you in your learning, help you reflect on your learning as a teacher, and also giving you tools in which to develop your practice. But what underpins it all is that it's contextually specific. We're not saying one size fits all. We're not saying that a child in Asia will receive the same type of teaching in the same context as a child in France. So what's important, I think, is that this underpinning of contextual specificity opens it up to everyone. It means that you as a teacher in a business context can look at it, reflect on it, and it's sufficiently wide to be of use to you as well.
Yeah, as you said, it's contextual because I think we're looking at the skills. I think what the skills the teachers need today and what will they need in the future. But obviously there's a slightly different skill set when we're working with adults or when we're working with really young children. There are a lot of skills that overlap, but there are also different skills within that. So it's interesting that, you're looking at, it very much depends on the context within that, but it's a tool or a framework that will apply for any teacher in whatever situation they have.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. I think that's the hardest bit, in my opinion, of the ELT profession, is this expectation that just because you're a trained, highly skilled professional in one area, those skills are directly transferable to another. And that our framework really takes into account the fact that I might well be lost with 3-year-olds, but very competent with university students. I might be great at teaching, English for aviation, and not so good at teaching English for medicine. So, yes, it's very contextually specific, but it's also, there are underlying principles that are common to everything. So I think it focuses on those, but leaves enough room for people to personalize their learning.
Yeah. And so think about the British Council and bringing it a little bit back to TESOL France. So what is the interface between the British Council and TESOL France? TESOL France as an association, an organisation that helps and supports English language teachers around France. And what is the connection between the two organisations?
So our two organisations have a long-standing history of working together. I've been going to TESOL France since 2011, I think. So we know each other very well. We respect each other's mutual goals. And as you say, there's a real complementarity there. So a lot of our work can be amplified by TESOL France, and a lot of TESOL France's work can be amplified by the British Council. And we're working very hard to make sure that we're doing that effectively. I'm really pleased to be giving this talk because I think the wonderful thing about TESOL France is it crosses all the boundaries. So it covers the teachers like you working in business, as well as teachers working in rural areas, as well as teachers teaching in state education. And so it's a wonderful community to be in touch with, and I hope that the audience will find what we've got to offer helpful.
No, I think so, exactly. It's like you've got a voice to inform people at TESOL France, as well as, you know, what you're doing at the British Council, and really about, you know, the main topic of your talk. I think we'll just go a little bit away here. It's about taking ownership of your professional development.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd just like to ask a little bit about you personally. So thinking about your professional development, could you give us a little bit of a background into how you came to be like head of English and school education at the British Council? So what brought you on that path, that journey?
Sure. When I think back, it's been a great journey. I've had a wonderful career within ELT. So I'm very pleased to talk about it because I think it's been something that I found very enriching all along. I always thought to myself I wanted to stay in the job I was doing as long as I found it enriching. And I can honestly say that I did gain something from everything I've done. I began teaching I was a language assistant, the British Council language assistant in France in 2003 in Nantes on a special kind of contract that I don't think was continued, but it was where you were left alone with the children on a 9-month contract as opposed to a 7-month contract, working more closely with a teacher. So I did that, and that was a baptism of fire, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved living in France. I then had the opportunity to come back and work at the University of Paris-Est Créteil back in 2005 as a lecturer. I stayed there for 2 years and then continued working there on and off for many years. I then had that moment that I think lots of people have in their 20s where you actually think, I really need to decide what I'm going to do for the years to come. So I had to go at being a journalist at the BBC in France, and I was a translator for UNESCO for a couple of years, both of which were very rewarding experiences. But one thing was really missing, and it was that constant contact, that feedback, that direct feedback you get from being in front of a class. And that then led me to apply for my job at the British Council as a teacher, take the CELTA, the Delta, become a CELTA trainer, Delta local tutor, and do a lot of work with universities in France around teaching their subjects through English as well. A lot of training of teachers there. From there, I carried on working in different universities around France. I took, in parallel to the British Council, I took a sabbatical year and went to Australia and taught in a university there. And then I decided that I was really interested by education, by the wider issues within it. So I studied a master's in comparative education. In parallel, I became the head of the bilingual section at the British Council, which welcomes about 900 bilingual children every year. And then eventually I moved into this job, which was created in 2023.
Okay, so it sounds like quite a varied and fascinating career. You sort of dipped in different places, a bit of journalism, a bit of with UNESCO, and then you've had this, as you said, a year in Australia on a sabbatical. And then it also, we're talking very much about professional development, that you've really taken it on board. You've done your CELTA, your Delta, you've then been a CELTA trainer and then a local Delta tutor. So it's really, and then you've also done your MA. So it sounds like you feel that development is it something that's key to a teacher? How would you define it?
Absolutely. I think it's something that's very interesting. It was one of the reasons I wanted to stay at the British Council all these years. I've been there 17 years now, I think. And it was really the fact that the British Council was ready to support my professional development, and still does to this day. And so that I've always been very lucky in that respect. But to answer your question about whether it's something key to being a teacher, I think professional development can take two different forms. It can be formal qualifications and training like I described, but it can also be an informal process of reflecting on your practice. And that's something I really believe very strongly in. It's that you can be the agent of your own professional development. You can reflect on what went well, what went badly, what you can do to do things differently the next time. And that's something I have always found extremely rewarding in teaching, is that it's not something where I don't think you can ever really master it. It's something that's constantly evolving, growing, and changing, and your practice is evolving, growing, and changing. And so I think the framework is something I believe very strongly in, and my colleagues in the UK and around the world have all contributed to this ongoing project of developing this CPD framework for teachers. But what I love about it is the fact that it recognizes that you are the owner of your training. Now, that's easy to say. You need institutional support. You sometimes need funding. But the British Council does make resources available to support you and help you take ownership of that journey.
Yeah, so I think it's as a key thing, as you said, to take your own ownership with that and to see how you can develop and to really reflect about it and maybe move forward or move sideways. So really taking a grip on that. It will be very, I think, interesting, informative to see what this framework is. Mm-hmm. I've never seen it. I've seen something on the Equals platform. Have you looked at that, which is a European framework?
So there are lots of frameworks out there and lots of different ways of thinking about professional development. In order to prepare our continuing professional development framework, what we did was we commissioned a report, a study that kind of looked at all the different changes that had taken place since our original framework 10 years ago. And with the two authors looked at all the blog articles that were out there, looked at all the frameworks that were out there, looked at recent research and so on. And they published a really interesting report called What's Changed in English Language Teaching. And that was kind of the input that enabled us to reframe and create the new framework.
So great. So as you said, research, reports, framework. And at the end of this keynote speech, what are the teachers from TESOL France, what are they going to be taking away with them?
So I really hope what they'll take away with them is our tools that will enable them to reflect in a structured way on their own professional development, tools that they'll be able to use to help others reflect on their framework, on their development, depending on their role, whether they're teacher educators, school owners, or whatever it may be. But I also hope they'll take away practical training options that are open access, free to everyone. Our resources, our Teaching English platform, is a platform used by 6.6 million teachers in the world and visited by over 100,000 in France every year. So that's a platform that can help you structure your development and give you the tools to really progress in your work. So I hope that's what people will take away.
I'd just really like to say thank you for the time, to just set aside a bit of time to introduce people to what your keynote speech is going to be about. And I hope it's given people a bit of a taste as to what to expect and to come along and to really come along with an open mind to think about, what is continuous professional development and to think about it, what is it that I could do as a teacher? How can I develop and how I can link this in with what's currently available at the British Council and also obviously a little bit with TESOL France, how we can do that, because that's one of our key things is really about professional development And that's, keeping these strong connections going between the British Council, TESOL France, and really working together. So thank you very much for your time today. And I really look forward to seeing you on the Saturday.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it.
This episode is sponsored by PeopleCert. PeopleCert. Dream it, do it.